Now, before Stay Hungry, Twisted Sister were not stars. They went through a decade of rejection, almost broke up a few times, and of course played a bunch of dingy New Jersey dive bars, and that ended up hardening them pretty well. They were underdogs, no doubt. But when Stay Hungry finally hit, people definitely took notice. And what followed was fame and all sorts of crap that went with it. All the stuff you get from too much success, too fast, and a band that's already cracking at the seams. And by the time Stay Hungry dropped on May 10th, 1984, Twisted Sister were really the kind of overnight success that comes after 10 years of eating crap sandwiches and asking for seconds. They'd been rejected by so many labels, but they kept clawing forward. Gig after gig, one piece of crap vehicle at a time, until the world actually started paying attention. And the first two albums were a case study in almost but not quite. Under the Blade came out in 82, and it's loud and scrappy, totally independent. And people dug it. It really got them talking, but not the people with the checkbooks. And then came You Can't Stop Rock and Roll in 1983, which managed to move over 100,000 copies in under a year, which is not bad for a bunch of face-painted lunatics from Long Island. But mainstream radio, still no dice. They were getting closer. The industry was definitely looking at them like a joke in need of a punchline, however. MTV did start warming up to them around that time, but even then, it was a slow thaw. The band had shot a video for the title track of You Can't Stop Rock and Roll, and that's where Dee Snider's brain started lighting up. And it was really working with the director, Arthur Ellis, that actually flipped that switch. Because Dee Snider realized that music videos didn't really have to be boring lip-sync parades. They could be crazy, theatrical, absurd, angry, funny, all at once. And that would end up making Twisted Sister. It was an epiphany, and it ended up shaping the entire Stay Hungry era, right down to the pratfalls and exploding dad chairs. But meanwhile, their relationship with Atlantic Records was definitely going down. The label had already tanked the rollout for You Can't Stop Rock and Roll, refusing to release the song I'm Me as a single in the US, even though it actually cracked the top 20 in the UK. Totally boneheaded move, and it didn't sit well with the band at all. And they definitely weren't shy about letting them know just how the hell they felt about it, especially Dee. He reserved a special hate boner for Rob Dickens of Atlantic UK, and when Dee played him We're Not Gonna Take It, Dickens recoiled like somebody had handed him a dead rat. He totally dismissed the song outright. And Dee, one never to really let a grudge die quietly, started just roasting him, and joked that the guy probably wanted them to sound like Kaja Gugu, which definitely would have been something. And then there was Doug Morris, president of Atlantic US, who famously referred to the band as the worst fucking piece of shit in the world. But money talks louder than taste, and by the end of '83, even with a stomach full of bile, Morris told J.J. French, "Next year, I'm going to make you one of the biggest bands in the world." And for once, a record exec actually made good on it. Well, at least to a point. But that was the group that kicked the door in. The Stay Hungry lineup of Twisted Sister was legendary, and it is definitely the one that smacked right into MTV, and just as well America's long-term memory, whether they wanted it or not. Dee Snider, of course, is a whole freak show rolled into one, slapping on some war paint on his face and howling like a banshee, looking like Alice Cooper meets Victoria's Secret. He wrote songs, ran his mouth, and somehow turned into the unlikely spokesman for the entire genre when the suits came knocking. Dee could torch a Senate hearing without breaking character, and actually proved to be pretty theatrical, confrontational, and actually smarter than any of those guys gave him credit for. Now, J.J. French, the rhythm guitar player, was also the co-pilot of the group, the founder, unofficial CEO of the circus, so to speak. He wasn't the flashiest player in the room, but he could book the shows, and he could talk to the lawyers, and he could keep the band from going completely off the rails somehow. And then, of course, you have Eddie Ojeda, who handled the other half of the guitar assault. Lots of really cool, flashy solos, big hair, big hooks. He brought the shred and the sizzle to the band. But together, Eddie and JJ could also pull off some pretty cool twin guitar stuff as well. Then you have Mark the Animal Mendoza, who played bass. He actually looked pretty animalistic, like he'd eat you alive if you made contact for too long. He didn't really play notes, he just beat them into submission. His tone sounded like a cement truck rolling downhill with no brakes. And his stage presence made him look like he was one bad amp buzz away from just going absolutely freaking ballistic. And at the back, pounding on the kit, you had AJ Pirro. And he was a hard-hitting, precise drummer. He always looked like he was having a blast while he was doing it. And he actually stayed with Twisted Sister through all the craziness up until he passed away in 2015. And without him, it never really quite felt the same. But this was the lineup that showed up in every over-the-top video, tabloid photo, screaming live show during those days. Twisted Sister basically played arenas and also burned their names into the carpet and then pissing into the fire. And they didn't just make Stay Hungry, they basically survived it. Right in the middle of the mess was a producer nobody wanted. But everybody had to deal with, Tom Worman. Now on paper, Worman had the resume. Motley Crue, Cheap Trick, Ted Nugent, all big names, all chart toppers. But to Twisted Sister, he might as well have just walked in, dropped trow, and crapped right on the floor in front of them. And the thing is, Atlantic Records didn't give the band a choice. Dee Snider was wanting somebody like Bob Ezrin, Roy Thomas Baker, guys who could make a record sound like the end of the world. But Worman was the hot shot at the time. He was the golden child in terms of producers. And Atlantic shoved him through the door like a real-life studio Trojan horse. The second he showed up, things were already starting to go sideways. Twisted Sister wanted heavy, gritty, something that sounded like it was recorded in a bar fight. Worman wanted polish and hooks, top 40 radio vibes, basically the opposite of what they're trying to do. And according to Dee, Worman hated their biggest songs. So he let that sink in for a moment. He wanted to cut We're Not Gonna Take It, I Wanna Rock, and The Price, which is basically the holy trinity of Twisted Sister. Dee said that he actually had to beg them to keep the songs in, and that Worman flat out told him, I'm only working for you for the money. Years later, Snider was still grinding that axe, saying the sickening part is that the guy still gets royalties from us. You could all hear him spitting when he says it. Worman, of course, denies all of that. He says he never tried to cut anything. He said that all he wanted them to do was just throw in a Saxon cover, which of course didn't go over too well. And he claims the band was thrilled with the album at the time. But then again, producers always say that the marriage is happy while the band is off filing for creative divorce. And J.J. French wasn't exactly liking Worman either. Years later, he'd go on to say that Worman barely showed up to the sessions at all. And it was actually engineer Jeff Workman who shaped the whole record. So depending on who you ask, Worman was either the ghost in the control room or the guy trying to pull the emergency brake on Twisted Sister's momentum. But none of it mattered in the end. The album got made, it blew up, Worman still cashed the checks, and the whole debacle was really a big clash of egos, as well as a snapshot of everything boiling under the band's surface. Creative control, bruised egos, distrust, that lingering feeling that even success came with somebody else's fingerprints on it. Worman might have helped polish the product, but nobody left that studio feeling clean at all. So while Stay Hungry was blowing up, the band itself was already imploding. The record that made them superstars is also the one that made them start falling apart from the inside. Fame didn't just come with money and guy liner. It also had grudges and jealousy and the slow gnawing realization that Twisted Sister really wasn't a band anymore. It was actually the Dee Snider show. J.J. French, who bled for the band since day one, was stewing over magazine covers and interview spreads, where Dee basically hogged the spotlight. From French's angle, Dee was becoming the front man and the brand, while the rest of them looked like just a bunch of rubes back there, background actors in a mascara commercial or something. And Snider actually didn't deny it. He said, I became the star and they were the sidemen. But then he'd go on to say, I never meant for that to happen. Kind of like pushing somebody off a cliff and then saying, well, I didn't plan for gravity to take hold. But Snider was the machine behind it all. The guy holed up in Jimmy Page's Soul Studios in Reading, England, during the You Can't Stop Rock and Roll sessions, writing songs by himself in total isolation. His family was back in the States, and his only company was Satan-themed decor as he was taking that dump and writing it. And he wrote The Price. And in his words, he said, that's the only place Satan wouldn't be hanging out. Try wiping your hindquarters with that kind of loneliness. But even We're Not Gonna Take It had been sitting in his back pocket since 1980. And that was actually born during the band's club days, simmering till the world was finally dumb enough to catch on. But all that solitary work came at a cost, with Dee taking all the glory and the band feeling like they're just kind of getting pushed back. And at one point, J.J. French claimed that Dee wanted to just can the entire lineup and rebuild the band from scratch with a fantasy supergroup of Yngwie Malmsteens. I mean, one Yngwie is definitely enough. Could you imagine a whole group of them? Meanwhile, Mark Mendoza, the animal, just plain wanted him dead. That's not metaphorical. He really, truly, deep in his heart of hearts, wanted that. And Eddie Ojeda, he got booted completely near the end of the Stay Hungry sessions. He came back, sure, but once you've been kicked out of the band you helped build, the trust doesn't exactly grow back. The album might have sounded united, but behind the scenes it was five guys chewing on each other's nerves and just trying not to snap. but what they created was huge. Even though they were basically standing on a fault line and the cracks were starting to hiss. Stay Hungry was just unapologetic. 9 songs, no consistency, no rules, zero concern for whether your mom liked it. It opened up with that fist pumper, ending with a big fat middle finger, and in between, ballads, horror flicks, biker threats, Sunday school melodies turned into protest anthems, and the kind of slapstick violence that made boomers call the cops on their TVs. It wasn't clean, but it definitely worked, and it worked because it was a mess that only Twisted Sister could have made. The title track, Stay Hungry, just charging out of the gate like a motivational speech from a guy who's been punched in the face for 10 years straight. Nothing fancy about it, and it doesn't need to be fancy. It sort of told the tale of fighting tooth and nail for scraps while everybody else got record deals and blow. And then comes the monster. We're not going to take it. And it's pretty hilarious when you think about the fact that the inspiration for that main line was taken from O Come All Ye Faithful. And when you listen to O Come All Ye Faithful and then you listen to the chorus, yep, it is definitely the same melody. But yet, it was still banned by Tipper Gore. The chorus, written in 1980, finally finding its moment, and when it hit like a bag of fireworks in a church pew. The video, with Mark Metcalf screaming himself into cartoon oblivion, Dee Snider exploding out of a teenage dude, was pure Looney Tunes with power chords. And MTV didn't even want to air the thing at first. It was way too much setup, not enough song. Once they did, it was unavoidable. It got everywhere. High schools, house parties, Super Bowl ads, political rallies, even allergy commercials. Burnin' Hell flipped the lights off and dragged the listener into a darker place. Less anthem, but more nightmare. Welcome to the abandoned land. It was like somewhere between Judas Priest and a haunted house ride. And somehow, it ends up in Pee-wee's Big Adventure. Because the 80s never really gave a crap about context anyhow. It's the kind of song that makes your born-again Christian aunt start praying hard. And then came Horror-Teria, part slasher film, part revenge fantasy, totally out of step with the rest of the album in the best way possible. And it's split between two twisted halves. Captain Howdy, a creepy sadist with a flair for abduction of young ones, and Street Justice, where the townsfolk handle things the old-fashioned way. Dee was thinking of this whole rock opera thing, but thank Satan it never happened. But still, the character haunted him long enough that he brought Howdy back for his own horror flick, Strangeland, in '98. And when a death metal band like Broken Hope covers your song, you know you've left a glam party and wandered into something much darker. I Wanna Rock took the dumbest premise in rock, literally just wanting to rock, and made it brilliant. The video sequel to We're Not Gonna Take It saw Metcalf return as this whacked-out teacher, only to get clobbered by another D transformation. What do you want to do with your life? I want to rock. It was pure slapstick adrenaline, and MTV couldn't spin it enough. Behind the scenes, things weren't so fun. Metcalf actually clashed with Dee Snider and the director, Marty Callner. By this point, the band was just barely holding it together. But on screen, oh, that was peak Twisted Sister all the way. Loud, ridiculous, and shameless. Then he had The Price, which slowed things down and got real for a second. This was the one that he wrote in Jimmy Page's studio bathroom. And this one didn't climb the charts, but it was a really nice ballad. And it also never went away either. It stayed in the band's set lists. Fans really dug it all the way through the decades. And it was really proof that Dee could do more than just scream. Then you got Don't Let Me Down, which is this like mid-tempo, part exhaustion, part tantrum, half love song, half nervous breakdown. No pyrotechnics, just pure frustration. People forget about this track, but there's a lot of sincerity in it, and not the fake kind that you generally tend to pump into power ballads. Then, of course, the Beast brought the menace back, stalking and growling and not blinking. Really nice slow grinder with some extremely haunting lyrics. Definitely the heaviest track on the album, with enough evil to choke out any glam fluff they tried to sneak back in. And then it ends with SMF, because subtlety can suck it. The song is a love letter to the band's loyal freak army, and a final punk-drenched exorcism. Never a single, but of course did not have to be. This one was for the lifers. The people who knew the band wasn't about radio hits or shiny spandex, more fury, community, and yelling loud enough to break things. But in the end, chaos was the point. The album did less flowing and more ricocheting, less polishing and more bleeding. 9 tracks of mayhem that somehow all added up just right. And because it was so unique, it still echoes to this day. And when Stay Hungry hit, it didn't just creep up the charts. It smashed right through the front door, grabbed MTV by the good old mullet, and made itself right at home. In the span of a few months, Twisted Sister went from the dungy old basement straight to the penthouse. From playing clubs for 50 sweaty drunks and a bartender who hated his life, to coliseums with thousands of screaming kids lined up just to watch them sign their names on plastic. At a Tower Records in Texas, the crowd got so out of control that it looked less like a meet and greet and more like a riot. And that shift wasn't just height. It was decades of rejection, getting kicked in the teeth. Stay Hungry with 9 tracks and 35 minutes of proof that the band everybody passed on could light the world on fire. No filler or padding or cute, deep artistic epiphany crap. It was just fists in the air rock anthems with just enough grease paint and defiance to make the suburbs nervous, which is what they set out to do. Over 3 million copies sold in the US, 6 million worldwide, from nobodies to chart-topping lunatics in full drag. And by August of '84, they're opening up for Dio at the Nassau Coliseum, a hometown gig that might as well have been for the Super Bowl for these guys. Instead of gold records, the band actually got gold medals, Olympic style, because Subtlety was never on the guest list. And Mark Metcalf, who was in the videos, also showed up as well. Still in full Niedermeyer mode, yelling at the crowd like they were in basic training. It was like their music videos had come to life and invaded the real world, which honestly really wasn't that far off. Every label that had rejected them got to eat it in real time. And it was a vindication, a huge vindication for the band. And MTV actually played kingmaker in all of this, because Time Warner actually owned both MTV and Atlantic Records, so Twisted Sister had what you might call a strategic advantage. Their videos were burned into the rotation. Rat had a collapsing floor in their video. Twisted Sister had Niedermeyer getting drop-kicked through drywall. JJ put it best, ours were cheesy but sophisticated. The perfect balance of Three Stooges, violence, and glam metal madness all at once. But behind every sold-out arena was a band still wondering just what the hell had happened. And Twisted Sister had barely finished basking in the glow of platinum sales, pyrotechnics, when the moral watchdogs showed up, with pitchforks and doing a whole hell of a lot of pearl clutching. With the band plastered all over MTV, Middle America was actually noticing their kids idolizing this cross-dressing, war-painted banshee and 4 grown men screaming about not taking it anymore. And so predictably, the hammer had to drop. Enter the PMRC, namely Tipper Gore. The PMRC were Tipper Gore's little after-school censorship club. The infamous Filthy 15 list was basically a moral panic tape, a collection of songs they thought were corrupting the morals of nation's youth. Nestled between the usual suspects, Prince, with Darling Nikki and Wasp, of course Motley Crue, was Twisted Sister. Not for a sex anthem, not for satanic lyrics, no, for We're Not Gonna Take It. The song had 0 profanity, no drug references, no sex, just power chord hymn to teen rebellion with a chorus ripped straight from A Christmas Carol. In the video, pure slapstick. It was Looney Tunes, but with guitars. But none of that mattered to the PMRC. Dee's eyeliner and the Niedermeyer face plant were apparently dangerous to America's youth, and the PMRC had to stop it. Or maybe it was just too easy to mock. Either way, the label stuck. But here's the backfire. Slapping a parental advisory warning on an album in 1985 was like putting a free beer sign on the front. Sales skyrocketed. Teenagers hunted those stickers like trophies. If Tipper Gore hated it, you knew it had to be worth hearing. So the PMRC tried to build a wall, and it ended up creating this roadmap. Dee Snider could have lashed out with another big dumb anthem or cheap insults, but instead he walked into the lion's den, dressed like a glam metal warlord, and calmly tore the place apart. September 19th, 1985, Senate chambers. All eyes were on him. There's Dee, long blonde hair, full glam regalia. You could practically hear the smug smirking from across the aisle. And then he opened his mouth and the room flipped. He wasn't angry, wasn't stupid. He was very surgical, clarifying lyrics, calling out misquotes, and explaining that just because you dress like a lunatic doesn't necessarily mean you are one. He defended artists and freedom of expression and the right to look like a Halloween costume year-round if he damn well pleased. The senators expected Beavis, and they got Atticus Finch in spandex. And in that moment, Dee Snider didn't just defend Twisted Sister. He stood for everybody who ever wrote a lyric that happened to make somebody squirm. So he spoke basically against not just censorship, but against the idea he had to fit some kind of tidy image in order to be able to get taken seriously. And for once, the makeup didn't make the man, it just pissed the right people off while he dismantled them with words. But success didn't kill Twisted Sister. The kind of reckless, label-enforced velocity that turns triumph into a meat grinder did. After Stay Hungry detonated in '84, everybody, Atlantic Records, the band, Their managers, their hairdressers, thought this ride would never end, so they floored it straight into a wall. Atlantic, of course, wanted another hit album. Right now. No time to breathe, no time to think, no time to figure out why Stay Hungry had worked in the first place, so they shoved the band back in the studio and came out with Come Out and Play in '85. And it might as well have been called Please Still Love Us. The lead single, a cover of Leader of the Pack, not a parody. A sincere cover of a 1964 girl group melodrama, revamped with motorcycles, leather, de-snarling like the fawns overdosing on Red Bull. It was supposed to be kitschy fun, but instead it came across as more of a cry for help, and fans recoiled. Critics laughed. Even MTV, which had once were eating out of their palm of their hand, gave it the side eye. The hunger was gone. The edge was dulled. The whole thing felt like it was just stitched together. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, things were going to hell in a handbasket. Whatever grudges had been brewing during Stay Hungry were turning pretty much septic now. Dee Snider's media spotlight had gone into supernova, while the rest of the band was just cooked in the glare. And then by the time they vomited up their third album, Love Is for Suckers, in 1987, Twisted Sister was basically not even a band anymore. It was Dee Snider and some ghosts. And the album wasn't even supposed to be a Twisted Sister record at all. It was meant to launch Snider's solo career. But Atlantic, ever the opportunist, slapped the band name on it to wring out at least a couple more bucks. And fans were not buying it. Dee was not either. He left the group a few months later, flipping the lights off in October of '87. And just like that, it was over. The band that had fought for over a decade to break through had gotten eaten alive in less than 3 years by the very success that they had earned. From packed coliseums to just open hatred, it was just too much, too fast. The wigs and the war paint got chucked in the closet, and for a long time it looked like that closet would just stay shut forever. But 2 decades after Stay Hungry tore through America like a flaming shopping cart, Twisted Sister came back with a sledgehammer and a grudge. In 2004, they re-recorded the whole album from scratch, slapped a new name on it, Still Hungry, instead of Stay Hungry. And this was their idea of basically saying this is how we wanted it to sound before Tom Worman polished it up until it squeaked. Did it have the magic of the original? No, it did not. Some people really liked it though, because I mean it's a real clean production, but it just didn't have that vibe, you know? It's like when you listen to the original Stay Hungry, there's just something about it. Something so wrong, yet so right. And then they tried to correct what was so wrong to make it all so right. And in doing so, it just completely lost the vibe. But the band felt vindicated by it. And they didn't stop with the original track list either. So the 2004 version put in some extra cuts, old favorites that never made the original cut, Never Say Never, Blasted Fast and Loud, Plastic Money, Rock and Roll Saviors. So there are definitely some deep cuts going on there. And hell, the band was doing it their way. Some fans liked it, and others really just kind of missed the original '84 version. And then in 2009, they brought it full circle and played Stay Hungry live, front to back, no edits, no filler or excuses, warts and all. And the reunion that made this all possible was about as unlikely as a peaceful Thanksgiving at the Mendoza household. It started in 1999 at a party for A&R exec Jason Flom. Dee, JJ, Eddie, Mendoza, and AJ showed up and ran through 3 songs in a kitchen 30 minutes before going on. Could have been a disaster, but definitely wasn't. The chemistry, totally there. Just like the hit Pause for 13 years. But these weren't the same guys who'd been spray painting each other's faces backstage in '84. They had day jobs now. Mendoza was working in law enforcement. Eddie and AJ were clocking in at regular gigs. JJ was managing artists. And Dee, he had actually become a brand, a radio host, TV personality, commercial voiceover legend. The man's voice could sell allergy pills, car insurance, and Satan, all in the same ad block. They weren't chasing stadiums anymore. French admitted that they could only pull off about 15 to 18 shows a year. They weren't rich rock stars. They were weekend warriors with mortgages. Dee put it best by saying, we're not making Bon Jovi money. If I'm flying coach and there's no AC, I'm not doing this anymore. But still something wild happened. Nostalgia caught fire. YouTube showed up. Those old videos, ridiculous, unforgettable, went viral all over again. And suddenly a new generation, who'd never seen Headbangers Ball, was quoting Niedermeyer and lip-syncing, I Want to Rock, in dorm rooms. You can never just say, I want to rock. It's always, I want to rock. And festivals opened the floodgates. They toured, they played the hits, burned down festival stages like it was 1984 all over again. But then came the gut punch. AJ Pirro died in 2015. No drama or build-up, he was just gone. And for a band that had weathered every kind of internal apocalypse, that one hit different. But they brought in Mike Portnoy of Dream Theater to step in to finish the live dates, which is, on paper, a pretty odd pairing. But Portnoy had the chops and the metal cred to keep the torch burning without turning it into a tribute act. He didn't pretend to be AJ, he just honored the slot. But even people who are not into the whole glam metal thing know the tracks on Stay Hungry. Not because they wanted to, but because these songs didn't ask for permission. They set up shop in your skull and paid rent. You don't choose to remember We're Not Gonna Take It. It just burns in your ear like a freaking earworm. Like a weird dream you thought you'd forgotten until somebody yells the chorus and your brain betrays you by singing along. And JJ French nailed it. He said people care. Decades later, under layers of irony and retro kitsch, and all the cringe that comes with time, people still care. That's either beautiful or horrifying, depending on who you ask. Either way, Twisted Sister carved their name into the wall, and the whole damn thing has not faded yet. So I want to thank my subscribers for just being frigging amazing, as you always are. If you haven't had a chance to subscribe to the channel yet, spin around really fast on your chair and then give the subscribe button a big double kick. And then while you're at it, hit an extraordinarily loud guitar chord and blow the like button to smithereens. Join the family. I want to thank you so much for watching.